and he's getting his head around.
Oh, man. All right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. In our fellowship of Christ, our leadership in the local church, and in our parenting of the children entrusted to us, we all seek forward momentum. This podcast is designed to provide that momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. I'm Eric Miller, and with me is the one and only Jeffrey Bogue.
How you doing, Eric?
Jeff, I am doing wonderful because we are on a video podcast.
I know. It's my goal to make Eric screw up the intro.
You almost did.
I try to do it every time we do a podcast.
You almost did. I have it to the point where I'm just gonna memorize it, and then when people come up to me, I could just say that to them.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. And you dressed up today.
I did. It's a video podcast.
I'm very impressed.
Actually, the truth is I was cold.
I know. It's true.
Jeff wore a blazer to church a few Sundays ago.
Is it a blazer?
I don't know. I don't know the technical term for yours because it was like
what makes a blazer a blazer?
It was a flannel something.
It was a flannel?
I don't know.
What are you talking about?
It looked warm.
I'll give you
style? That. It looked warm. I'll give you that.
It was warm.
Have I no style? Look at this jacket.
Well, I'm just saying. I don't withdraw the question.
We're just driving people to our YouTube channel to watch this video right now and find it. I love it. Well, Jeff, our topic today is coming out of COVID.
Oh, so exciting.
Please, Lord, let us come out of COVID.
Yeah, I know. Everybody wants to talk about COVID some more.
Well, we've had pastors, we've had people that have asked, like, from a ministry standpoint, how do you adjust? I remember even back when we both kind of came on staff, you became the president of Momentum. You hired me a couple months later. March 1 was my first day of working for Momentum, and 2 weeks later we were like, hey, this COVID thing might be real.
Yeah.
We were hoping that it would just be a couple weeks, and as you know, the summer went along, we had to cancel things, and now we're like trying to figure out how do you adjust, how do you shift. That's not just like a national ministry thing, that's everyone.
Yeah.
So give us kind of your thoughts on this. How do you come out of COVID? Pastors are curious. Families are anxious. Help us wrap our minds around that.
So I'll preface this a little bit because I think you have to understand some things about COVID. One, I think you have to realize that COVID is global and local. Yeah. So we did a leadership summit here at Grace Church where I pastor, and I told our leaders, 300-400 of them that were gathered, I said, when you look at events that has disrupted the planet. So when you talk about COVID, the frustrations that we have in North America are the ones they have in Canada, the ones that they have in France, the ones that they have in Australia, on and on and on. So when you look at events that have disrupted the planet, the four that I could think of was the flood,
nice.
World War I, World War II, and COVID.
Yeah.
So if you got another one, let me know. But those are the four that I thought of, right? And when you look and say, pretty much everybody in every corner of the world is talking about the same thing. Global disruption is a very, very rare thing. Yep. And 3 of those 4 disruptions have happened in the last 100 years. So the COVID is a deal on that level. Now, what you think about it, what your politic is, and how you responded to it, that's another question. Yeah. But as far as like it disrupted everything and everybody had to deal with it, it's a very, very rare occurrence that has occurred. And I think that's important for pastors and leaders. If you're a parent leading your family or maybe even leading at work, what the stress and the fatigue and the frustration that you feel is legitimate. And put your politics aside because the Republicans started the COVID bus and the Democrats are driving it right now. So what happens is you look at all of that and you realize that it scared everybody. Nobody really knew what to do with it. They made the decisions that they made, and all of that can really only be truly evaluated in hindsight.
Yep.
So as a leader, that's true of all of us,
Yeah.
right? We literally, I had somebody frustrated with me during COVID, and they said, Pastor Jeff, we feel like you're making this up as you go. And I said, I am. I absolutely am making it up as I go.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm too young to be in World War I or II,
Yeah.
and none of us are, made it through the flood. So
Yep.
I'm like, it is a thing on that level. So remembering that is important to coming out of it, right? That's why I laid that. That was one thing. The second thing I say is it's incredibly local. So how you feel and how COVID has affected you has very little to do with how it's affected me.
Yeah.
So some people would say, why are we talking about COVID? And then other parts of the country, and maybe even cities within the country, and maybe even your church within that city is saying, we're just now opening our doors back up,
Yep.
right? So you have to remember all of that. And you have to remember all of that when you think about coming out of it or getting your head around it again, right? That everybody's at a different place on the road. It affected you differently. You were led through it in different ways. And then honestly, just depending on what your occupation is, if you're a teacher, if you're a governmental worker, if you're in healthcare, it's affecting you all day, every day. If you run anything to do with supply chains, right? Yeah. So you just have to remember all of that. And it's funny, like when I talk about COVID here, even at our church, the 20-year-olds are like, drop COVID. And I'm like, because you guys aren't dealing with it. You have to understand that guy over there, his stress levels are through the roof at his job because he can't do his job.
Yep.
Right? It's affecting it still. So coming out of it, it means a gazillion different things, right? And so I want to give like principles, not so much clear direction,
That's
right?
good. Yeah.
So first thing I would say is this. You're going to have to set your own end date with COVID. So the government is not going to look at you and say, you know what, it's been 24 months. Let's move back to normal. And the school isn't going to do that, and et cetera. So as a ministry leader, I'm going to have to look and say, barring a resurgence of like the Omicron variant or whatever, we're going to stop dealing with COVID and start dealing with life post-COVID, and we're the ones that are going to decide what that date is.
Yep.
And we did that with Momentum. We certainly did that as Grace Church of Greater Akron. And we're like, nobody's going to help us with this.
Yeah.
So we're just going to have to decide that's what that is, right? So I would put a marker in the ground if you haven't already that says this is when, even as a family, this is when we're done.
Yep.
This is when we're done being afraid to send our kids on a trip or to, this is when we're done, and we're going to move past that.
Yeah.
The second piece of that is you're going to have to define what done is. So some people are going to say, done is like, I'm just done. Some people are going to say, done is when everybody in my circle is vaccinated. Some people are going to say, done is when everybody in my circle is unvaccinated, so I'm changing circles. And so I would actually put definitions to those things so that the people around you know what you're talking about. Then a little principle that I have is that I like to say a lot, you cannot over-communicate. So as a leader, you communicate.
Yeah.
And then from that point forward, you start to work at what's ahead instead of trying to recover what's behind. So when you set that date, you look and say, we used to have 30 kids in our youth group. Now we have 12. These are the 12 kids we're going to move forward with.
Yep.
It's not that we forget the other kids or they're not unwelcome, but they haven't responded to us.
Yeah.
they haven't set the done line in their, and I said done line on purpose, and their family. So the future of what I'm going to build is going to have to be built around these things, not those things.
Yeah. Jeff, that's really good because in some of the circles that I'm in, if you want to watch a pastor or a pastor or a parent have a panic attack, you just say, hey, you've been contract traced, or your child.
Yeah.
And what that means then, they know that there's like certain things that the world now says, or that you are being forced upon. And so to communicate, to figure out within your context, your family, your church, your ministry, what does that look like? How are we moving forward? And maybe that even means like we're going to follow the standards of what the CDC or the government are enforcing, because that then you connect those things to it. It's submitting to the governing authorities. It's whatever. But it's defined. It allows you to move forward and make progress rather than feeling trapped, which causes some of that anxiety and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think when you're setting that line, I really think you should research the other side of your opinion.
Yeah, that's good.
So if you're really, really strong on quarantining and masking and those kind of things, look at like right now the research is out that says the shutdown, stay at home did almost nothing to prevent COVID deaths. So it's like, well, am I overreacting?
Right.
If you're on the side of the coin of like COVID was fake and it's just the flu, I'm like, I'll introduce you to people who had it and fought for their lives, and I'll introduce you to loved ones who lost healthy, young, and middle-aged people to it.
Yeah.
So it's a thing. Because it's a brand new thing, the only facts that you have are hindsight.
Yes.
And so you can look and say, we overreacted. And then you would look as a family and say, so maybe I'm overreacting. You can also look and say, in hindsight, some people underreacted. And so these are the cautions we're going to have going forward. Yeah. I do think that there is a very strong consensus right now that we're going to have to live with COVID.
Yeah.
That it's not going to be a virus that we defeat.
Right.
It's going to be a virus that becomes a part of our lives.
Right.
And you're going to have to decide how you're going to live life based from that point.
So as pastors, then let's talk a little bit to our ministry leaders here.
Yep.
How do you not give up in creating, a new era, a new definition, new vision of what ministry looks like for you?
Yep.
You talked a little bit about that at that leadership summit, and you tied it beautifully, I think, to Isaiah 40 and that passage that's there, the effort that it takes to create something new. We can't really go back to pre-COVID, this is what we would do. Like the rules have changed in a lot of our ministry realms. So how do you navigate that? What recommendation would you give to our ministry leaders?
Yeah, I think ministry and the world has changed, and elements of it have changed permanently, and everybody's figuring out what those things are. So I would say to a ministry leader, you need to abandon all sense of like when it gets back to normal. You're probably living in a version of normal right now. Yeah. And so instead of trying to recapture something, look and say, what opportunities has God laid out before us? Because COVID actually opened a lot of doors. Yeah. And there's a lot of opportunities that weren't there before. Yeah. And then start working toward those opportunities. And what we were talking about at the Leadership Summit, the scripture says you endure that. God, Isaiah 40 basically is God is omniscient, he's omnipresent, he's sovereign. Trust that. And when you trust that, you will rise up on the wings of eagles and you will soar and you won't grow weary and you won't faint because the Lord's strength is sustaining you. And the imagery that I gave there was I said, have you ever seen an eagle take flight in slow motion? Like the effort, an eagle is, if it's not the biggest, one of the biggest flying birds there are, the category of eagles. So if you watch that bird get its weight off the ground, especially if it's carrying something, the strength and the effort it takes to get off the ground to a point where it can soar, right? Where it's gliding and riding the thermals and things like that. And I would look at every ministry leader and I would say, you have to, if you want to soar again, you have to commit that effort to get off the ground.
Yeah.
That effort should not be redirected or directed at trying to recover what was. That's gone. It's 24 months later, it's gone.
Yep.
It's not that we don't love people, and it's not that we give up on people. It's that if they've totally checked out on you for 24 months, they've probably made their statement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we kind of have to know that and understand that. I would look then and I would say, let's try to understand how our culture's changed and your local culture I'm talking about.
Yep.
Let's then look and say what programs are valuable, what aren't. Where's our community responding to us? Where aren't they responding to us? And then let's put effort and experimentation into that.
Yeah.
So every church probably needs to go into some version of church planting mode or mindset.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's really healthy. I think it's really good to do that. But it's discovering that and discovering the people that you meet along the way.
I like that a lot. I like the thinking of like, hey, this is the hand we've been dealt. How do we leverage it for the gospel? How do we restart in a way of focusing on the people who are here and the resources that we have?
I think what you're saying is absolutely huge because
Yeah.
if there really are only four global events, if I'm even kind of right about that, then what that means is that as the current body of Christ representing his heart and mind on the planet right now, we were uniquely chosen
Yeah.
to make Jesus make sense in this very, very historical time. And so we need to think like victorious winners with that. Somebody asked me one time, they said, they were asking a version of like, what do you think is wrong with the church today? And I said, I think part of what's wrong with this is we think like losers. And we think defeated, and we think the world's chasing us down, and everything changed, and all the people who disagree with us they're winning every argument. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a victorious church to me.
Right.
I'm thinking like a loser instead of thinking like a winner. You flip that around, you look at COVID, the openness to relationships is greater than it's ever been. Whenever there is uncertainty, there's a place that the gospel can enter. Yep. Whenever it's not brightest, it's not darkest before the storm kind of thing. I would look and say, whenever there's great darkness, light is more powerful and potent. There's enormous reinventing your ministry model and not having to sacrifice the sacred cows because COVID slaughtered them for you is a gift.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? Like there's enormous opportunities. We have to think evangelistically and victoriously as we approach those opportunities. Now, if you're a local pastor and you're listening to this, what you want me to say is tell me the opportunities. And I would say COVID's local.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know what the opportunities are, or I'm trying to figure out the opportunities in Akron, Ohio.
Yep.
I don't know what they are in Maryland.
Yeah.
But they're there because God is sovereign. We're His church, and this is a historical global event.
Yeah. Yeah. Get your leadership team together. Pray. Research. Like
ask your community.
Yeah.
Survey people. What's our community need from the church right now?
Yep.
And do it in person. Don't do it online. Like there's an amazing openness. It's funny with COVID. Pre-COVID, everybody thought that the way to reach young people was technology. What COVID showed us is the people least likely to respond to technology were young people. They wanted personage.
Yep.
They wanted to be together.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's a pretty good opportunity, right? That's a really good opportunity to create spaces like that and conversations like that. So kick out of I'm trying to get people to come back. They've made their statement at this point. Yeah. Now, if they need cared for, of course, shepherd them, right? I'm not trying to be cold here. But if you've been begging that person to come back to church for 2 years,
right,
they're letting you know where they stand on that.
Yeah.
Kick into what opportunities are open to us and how can we meet those things? Because I know, like during COVID, the church was one of the only community organizations that was functioning. And we used our religious freedoms to do that, to serve our community. And it positioned us differently in our community because they saw that we were going out of our way to serve them.
Yeah, I think even having that victor's mindset is a big deal for pastors. And I really like what you're saying about understanding that you've come through a global pandemic, right? One of those four things, and you didn't die. You didn't, like statistics. We're starting to see statistics about the church where there are more churches that have closed in the last year than have opened.
Yep.
We're seeing statistics about burnout rates of pastors, and we probably all know somebody who quit being a pastor during COVID because it was brutal, and so the point of that is to like think like that, Victor. If you've made it through, good job, but now turn the corner.
Yep.
Let's keep going.
And in that, admit that you're tired.
Yes.
If you didn't quit as a pastor, you wanted to.
Well, that's kind of where I want to go next.
Okay,
is
go ahead.
How do we now find rest?
Yeah.
And recoup from that time? Because you did talk about that a little bit at that leadership summit.
Sure did.
And you could feel like there was, I don't know, 400 or 500 people maybe in the room.
Yeah.
But you could feel like a collective, like, yes, we need that. Like, we made it here. How do we keep going? Because we can't keep going at this pace. I mean, we even talked with the Momentum staff, like, we're going to get out of emergency mode.
Yep.
And we're going to operate in a way of health. And that means we defined what that meant for our team. And again, when we did that with our staff, it was like, okay, like you could feel the breath of air like, okay, now we can reframe it and have a healthier perspective. But how do you find rest if you're kind of in that position to reconnect?
You have to remember that your COVID experience is unique to you. Mm-hmm. You just have to remember that. Some people, I just give you examples of conversations because the ultimate answer is I can't give the individual listener an answer. Yeah. But I can show them how to investigate it. So I've talked to people, they're like, the church is a jerk, organized religion's a jerk, Jeff, you're a jerk. And I look at them and say, wait, you're just exhausted. No, I'm not. You work us like a dog. I'm like, no, I don't, buddy. Everybody work like a dog. Like, right. It's just an emergency.
Yep.
And so I run into people who won't admit that they're tired and they're burned out and they want to blame. Mm. And a lot of the people who are your critics or that you may be critical of, you probably are wrestling with that. Yeah. And it's been too long and it's too much aggravation and pain, and here we are. So that's one mindset. Yep. The other mindset is I decided to cancel COVID 18 months ago. What's your guys' problem? Yeah. And I'm like, well, I'm happy for you that in your world and in your occupation and in your family, you had the ability to make that decision. Mm-hmm. Because most people didn't have the ability to make that decision. Yeah. Right. So, but you own that business and that's your family and you can do that. Right. So COVID was a joke and not COVID was a joke, but like, I just decided to be done with it. I'm like, well, so there's there's nothing wrong with me, even though there's everything wrong with me. There's well, I canceled it. Why can't you just cancel it? And then I think the healthy perspective is this: I'm tired. I need to set a done date. And I need to set that done date. And then I need to give myself and my team time to refuel and re-envision. One of the things that we did, usually at this leadership summit that we have here at Grace, usually I cast vision every year. I didn't cast vision this year. What I did is I cast maybe a vision to rest. Mm-hmm. And I said, you guys need to rest. You need to get on your feet. I've looked at our staff and I said, you need to give volunteers sabbaticals. So you need to give them organized time off, and a sabbatical has a return date. Yep. So if you got 5 youth staff, give this one a month, return, then give the next one a month, then return, give the next one, and let people rest and let them think and let them recover. Then we'll hunt again. Like we'll envision again. And during that rest period, use that as a time to study and understand your culture, and come back with a vision for that of ministry that works in the new world that we live in. So I would say that for pastors. Some pastors just checked out and you've been resting for 2 years. You need to get up and moving.
Yeah.
Most pastors worked really, really hard to watch their sheep and try to understand them, and that's just frankly exhausting. Yeah. And the bigger your ministry, the harder that is to do those things. But you have to feel it, and you have to use your wisdom with it. Yeah. If your ministry is ready to go, cast vision and go into the new world. If your people are like, we've been so faithful and loyal and we don't think we do it, then give them sabbaticals, maybe even yourself. Yep. And then if you've just kind of been sitting buying your time, you bought it. Yeah. Like, let's get at this thing a little bit.
Yeah. Jeff, that's so good. In fact, I can just picture like every listener sharing this podcast episode with somebody to say, hey, I need a sabbatical.
Yeah.
So
you should.
If you want to do that, Jeff
Bogue said.
Or tell your pastor that you should have. Yeah, but that principle of and that even that word of Sabbath rest is so important. It's not the disengaging, it's the coming back. There is that return date. But what are you doing while you're resting? You're not just like binging Netflix and like not think. You're being proactive and engaging your mind with the vision. What you're assessing the resources you have. You're figuring out what's the next step.
So I think at Grace Church, we mandate sabbaticals. You don't have a choice. Yeah. And so every 5 to 7 years, you must go on a sabbatical. We believe in that for our full-time staff. We believe in them that strongly. Yeah. And you can binge Netflix for a couple of days, but if you're really passionate about what you do, you're bored real quick. Yep. And so get yourself healthy, get yourself rested, and the Lord, spend time with the Lord. And the Lord will draw you. He'll drift you, so to say, into His vision for your ministry. Yeah. Now, if you can't take a 4 or 6 week sabbatical, then take a day out of your week or an afternoon, and don't book it. Yep. Just go be with God. Yep. Do whatever you do, and rest yourself up that way. But you have to understand. Yeah. The magnitude of what our world has gone through, and we have to lead. We are the church, so we have to make Jesus make sense in this new world. The way that you're going to make Jesus make sense is to spend time with Jesus. Yeah. It's not just to make 10 more phone calls. So you can pace that out. Yeah. Now, listen, I want to be careful because I'm just being honest, and hopefully if you're a regular listener, you know that's kind of my thing a little bit, and I just tell you what I think. But some of you have not held youth group or Sunday school or done anything for months, and you don't need a sabbatical. Yeah. You need to get rolling. Yeah. Right? And so you have to look at your local situation. My team, who had to track down tens of thousands of people, they need a break. I need a break. Yeah. And so it just depends on how you've approached it, what the leadership's done, and what the expectations were. You got to be honest about that stuff. You got to be honest about your need to get at it and work hard, and you just as much need to be honest about your exhaustion and need to take a little bit of time and space to reconnect with God and move forward. Yep.
No, that's really good. Well, Jeff, thank you for sharing your heart with us on that. I would say if you are just finishing listening to this episode and God's putting something on your heart, maybe you need to like pull the car over, maybe you need to like write something down that the Holy Spirit's putting on your heart to think about, to a next step to take. We want to be a resource to you, to help you benefit, to help you in your ministry or even in your parenting. And so that's oftentimes, I know I listen to a podcast and I've learned something, I hear God speaking to me in a powerful way, and I just keep moving on.
Yeah.
And so if you do that with this episode and God's really laying something on your heart, don't just move on. Capture that thought, write that down, send an email to somebody, forward this podcast to somebody, figure that out. So thanks, Jeff, for sharing that. That'll do it for today's episode. Next week, we are talking about what you were just touching on of making Jesus make sense. So you'll have to tune in next week for that episode. We're excited about talking about evangelism and how you can help other people learn who Jesus is. So that'll do it for today's episode. Thanks for listening in. We'd be honored if you'd subscribe to this podcast, share it with people, check out the upcoming episodes. Follow us on social media at Momentum Ministry Partners. And if you ever have questions that we could answer on our podcast, you can submit those to us via our email, which is info@buildmomentum.org, or DM us on any of our social media. Thanks so much for tuning in.